We are live.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Dr. Blanton?
Present.
Dr. Bullock? Chair Dempsey?
Present.
Vice Chair Fleming?
Present.
Ms. Edwards?
Present.
Dr. Graham? Dr. Houston? Dr. Locklear? Dr. Marr? Dr. Elliott?
Present.
Dr. Penfield?
Present.
Superintendent Truitt? Mrs. Jones? Dr. Holland?
Present.
Dr. Weddington?
Here.
Dr. Griffin?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
And Mr. Patton. We have quorum.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome commission members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, and online listeners to the July 13th, 2023 monthly meeting of the North Carolina Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission. This Standards Commission develops and recommends to the State Board of Education rules related to all aspects of educator preparation, licensure, continuing education, and professional standards of North Carolina educators. I am Van Dempsey, Chair of the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission, and I call this meeting to order. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website, www.ncpublicschools.org, on the SBE meetings link. The meeting is also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the e-board agenda. I will now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Commission members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this commission. Does any member of the commission know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussions on the matter and from voting on the matter. Commission members, you have had an opportunity to review the proposed agenda for today's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda for the June 8th, 2023 meeting?
So moved.
This is Randy, second.
Thank you both. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. The minutes from our previous commission meetings on June the 8th and have been prepared and made available to you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you both. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The link for the July State Board of Education meeting has been sent to you prior to this meeting. The recording is bookmarked at the presentations for the Educator Standards and Practices Committee, which is the committee that handles the work of PEPSC, and you have that link available for you to review outside of the meeting. I'd now like to move to the NCDPI staff updates and discussion and state board updates. Dr. Evans, I'll turn it over to you.
As Dr. Chair Dempsey just mentioned, the link will provide those updates for the ESMP committee. If you have any questions, please reach out to Dr. Dempsey or myself or Dr. Fleming, and we'll make sure to get answers for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Tom Tomberlin will present two policy amendments, LICN 005, licensure renewal requirements, and LICN 008, licensure fees. First, he will discuss LICN 2005. Dr. Tomlin.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Dempsey, and good morning to all PEPSC members. So we have a proposed policy amendment for you today, and this is related to the renewal of a continuing professional license. As a preface to this, I just want to point out that we have changed within the policy. It refers heavily to LEAs, and we have just changed that to the more generic PSU. So that's one change you should be aware of, but not substantive. We start with, in section 2, with section F, subsection F. And this is to indicate that educators with an expired non-provisional North Carolina continuing professional license with a 5-year renewal cycle may be eligible for a 3-year initial validated IPL at the request of an employing PSU. So what this means is your 5-year cycle, you're on your 5-year cycle and you've let it expire. And then at some point later on, you decide you want to come back and teach. If a PSU agrees to employ you, they can do what's called the validation of the license. This kind of overrides the requirement for the CEUs, issues them a 3-year IPL, and during that time, the educator must complete all 8 renewal credits that they missed in their last renewal cycle in order to advance the license. If the educator does this, then completes all those CEUs, then we'll issue them another 5-year CPL. If they don't, the license at the end of the 3 years will remain expired until they complete that 8 renewal credits. But what we're, and then the next piece of this policy is this option shall not be for currently employed educators who have not met renewal requirements or educators who are employed in a North Carolina PSU in the fiscal year prior to the application. So an educator would not be able to leverage this policy to give them 8 years to complete their renewal credits. If you were employed in the prior year, you can't validate the license through this process. There has to be a year break between the expiration of your CPL and the validation of the license for a 3-year renewable. This is responding to a question in the field as to whether a license can be validated multiple times. And this clarifies that one can do that, provided there is that break of service from the expiration of the CPL to the issuance of the validated IPL for 3 years. And that is the, so the other, we just clarify that statement in G below. The option shall not be for currently employed individuals who have not met licensing requirements. And then down below, there we had the old CEU requirements in the policy. Those are no longer, they expired on June 30th, 2018, so they're no longer relevant. We're striking those out just to provide some streamlining and clarity to the policy, and then make it clear that these are the current renewal requirements for educators. And then a little farther down, most of this is just strike throughs to clarify, and it goes for student service personnel as well. And then at the bottom of and then it clarifies school administrators. And these are just kind of cleaning up the policy. And then we have a diagram here where we'll be striking the left-hand side of this table and just going with the right-hand side, which is the current CEU requirements for different educator classes. And then finally at the bottom here, in accordance with, so we're basically eliminating the retirement license. That is an old license that an educator could apply for. It had a 5-year renewal with it. They didn't have to complete CEUs. I mean, they had to do a modified CEU schedule to maintain that license, but we are eliminating that license in lieu of the fact that the lifetime license has been created. So educators, that is the license that would allow an educator to maintain license after retirement. It does not require additional CEUs as part of that, and then it's issued for the remainder of the educator's life. And we're just clarifying in policy that the retirement license is no longer in effect. And we strike through some of that language. And then I think that's the gist of the policy revisions to this. I do see there is a question in the chat if you would like me to answer that, Dr. Dempsey.
Sorry, it was muted. Please go ahead.
So the question is, for validated licenses, is it still acceptable for a person to complete credits more quickly than the 3-year period and have the license converted from validated to the CPL after 1 or 2 years? I don't think there's anything in policy that prevents that. And Susan Ruiz is chiming in with yes. I would suggest to LEAs that this would create kind of more effort on the part of our licensure system. There's nothing different about an IPL as opposed to a CPL. It is possible, but for the scheduling of licenses and renewals, it doesn't matter if the person just rides out that IPL for the 3 years and then submits renewals for the 5-year license at the time of expiration. But one could do that, to answer your question.
Any other questions?
Dr. Bullock has her hand raised.
Dr. Bullock?
Hi. Hey, Tom, I have a question about initial license.
Sure.
I'm in support of this. I think this is great if someone steps out for family reasons or whatever and wants to come back. But if someone gets an initial license, say they go through a teacher prep program and they apply for initial license, and then they step out to go to graduate school or et cetera, and then decide to come back into the classroom, what is the policy there? Because I don't know that that's in here anywhere. So it just made me think about that. So if somebody doesn't have a continuing license but decides they want to teach a little bit later, what's the rule?
So I'm going to call on Susan because I don't want to get this wrong. Because this is this happens with some regularity. So I want to make sure I understand it. I think there is a process for extending the provisional, but I would like Ms. Ruiz to comment on that.
Yes. So assuming that they meet the testing requirements for their IPL within the first 3 years of the license, then they can be extended at the request of an employee in North Carolina school system.
So, right. So to clarify that, Susan, as long as the only thing that's outstanding in the requirements is the 3 years of teaching experience, that IPL can be extended for the educator to meet that 3 years.
Correct.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to check.
Sure. Good question.
Any other questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the policy amendments to LIC and 005 to be sent to the State Board of Education in August?
This is Ann. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock. A second?
Nance Medway, I'll second.
Dr. Evans, did you catch that?
I did.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Dr. Tomlin, LIC and 008.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dempsey. So LICN 008 is our policy that handles licensure fees. And we are making the policy recommendation for an increase to those fees. And let's begin with the statutory authority of the board to do so. This is founded in 115C270.10. The state board shall establish by rule a schedule of fees for professional educator license and administrative changes. And listed below are the areas for which they are authorized to make those changes. And we are bringing a policy revision based on this authority of the State Board of Education. So the proposed changes to the licensure fee. So for in-state IPLs, the fee is currently $70, and we're requesting a proposed fee increase to $85. And you'll see that there's an asterisk to this. Pursuant to General Statute 270.10A1, the State Board of Education reimburses the application fee if the applicant successfully earns an initial professional license from a North Carolina approved EPP. So this change would not have any fiscal impact on our in-state EPP completers who are going through what we call the traditional route, because it would be reimbursed by the state. Second is our out-of-state IPLs. I'm sorry. Let's go back to that. Out-of-state IPLs would increase from $100 to $115, and initial residency licenses, the current fee is $100, and the proposed fee is $115. Next slide. The renewals and other services. So renewals, the current fee is $35 for every 5 years. We're proposing a fee increase to $75 every 5 years. And I will discuss this particular application fee in depth in this presentation. All other applications, there's a wide variety of application types in there. They're generally set at $60 under the current fee schedule. We're proposing an increase of those fees to $70. So the rationale for the fee changes. The context of this is based on historical data. The licensure office processes approximately 50,000 applications per year. We have also email support to Ask Licensure. And in the past year, that account has seen 23,747 emails. Phone calls in the past year range from about 20,000 to about 25,000 calls annually. And that's based on our estimates that phone volume that we answer per day runs about 80 to 100 phone calls per day from the field. Many of you know, especially in the LEAs, that educators and even some LEA representatives express frustration with the phone lines, that they're tied up for days. This does not reflect the total number of calls. This reflects the total number of calls answered. The licensure office employs 10 FTEs as specialists, 2 FTEs as processing assistants, 4 FTEs as regional assistant licensure consultants, and 3 FTEs as managers who also function part-time as specialists. So that's the context of the volume and the staff that we have to support it. So in researching the fee requests, I looked up the fees for the other North Carolina occupational licensing boards, and you can see I've purposely selected things that seem to be comparable to the teaching profession in terms of the education required and the work that is done, with the exception of the first one there, the National Board of Barber Examiners. I don't think the education is similar, but I do think it's important to point out that a barber pays the 5-year equivalent of $250 to keep a license in the state of North Carolina, And for an educator, it's $35 for that same period. And you can see this list here. I think another thing that's especially important is many of our school social workers have what's called an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker license, and that they're paying that renewal to keep that license at a rate of $375 for every 5 years. In addition to the $35 that they pay to keep their school social work license with the state board. And the same thing goes, and then if you look down to the North Carolina speech and language pathologists and audiologists, that's $500 in their 5-year renewal cycle, and they have to keep a current North Carolina. They have to renew their salary authorization. They have to demonstrate renewal with us as well. So this is just to give some context of what the licensure fees are across the state for what we believe are comparable professions to the teaching profession. Those that are marked, I'm sorry, just to clarify to everybody, those 5-year equivalents that are marked with an asterisk, those renewal fees are every 2 years, and so the 5-year equivalent is 2.5 times the annual renewal fee, where everyone else is based on an annual renewal fee. Licensure fees relative to teacher salaries. So one thing that I did was go back and look at what is the 5-year cumulative salary in 2017 with the renewal fee of $35. So what would a teacher earn over those 5 years, and what percentage of their total income does the $35 renewal fee represent? And you can see it's about 0.02%. And as in later years, that would reflect 1/100% for more experienced teachers. And now we look at the 5-year cumulative salary, and this is reflective of the 22-23 salary schedule. We don't know what the legislature is coming out with for the 23-24 salary schedule, but then we've compared that $75 fee, and you see here the percentage of that cumulative salary over 5 years is still only 0.03% across all years of experience. Market forces. The role of NCDPI licensure specialists is not a closed market, so we're not the only game in town as far as the NCDPI staff. PSUs also employ licensure specialists, and there is the potential for competition for qualified personnel between the state agency and the 115 LEAs and 200 plus charter schools across the state. The role of licensure specialists is extremely complex, and the volume of the work is great. And so this is a skilled job. This is not just data entry. These folks have to understand, have a deep and expert knowledge of our licensure policies in the state. And the budget considerations. So what we have heard is from the LEAs and from others is that educators require more direct support to the client base. And that would have to come from additional staffing. What we do know is that clients prefer phone and email support to instructions on the web. Folks don't want to go to the web and read how you apply for a license in the state. They want someone on the phone that will talk them through it, or they want to send emails and have an email exchange to guide them through the process. And of course, if we want to serve the customer base as well as we can, but that would require additional staffing to support that kind of work. Client feedback clearly indicates that better support is needed, and we also want to improve processing times for our applications. And so our current setup in the licensure office would not allow that. Currently, what we do is 2 licensure specialists are assigned to the phone support every day. And so if we increase the phone support, and those calls are nonstop, so those specialists do not have time to process licenses while they're manning the phones. And so if we are going to support better phone support for our clientele, we would have to have additional positions to do that. Additionally, there's the issue of technology enhancements. The NCDPI online licensure system is outdated and behind the current technology. As many of you know, we went through an RFP process last year. It did not result in a selection. So we still recognize the need that the technology is not where we need it to be for efficiency to be at its optimum. But the cost of retaining such an efficient system is greater than our current budget allows. Legacy processes such as paper and microfiche, and we still use both those methods of licensure, create the need for better document storage and access when it comes at increased cost. So we do have a microfiche system on the first floor of NCDPI, and when specialists have to examine licenses from a certain time period back, we have to go down and access the licensure system. Now, how far back does this go? I can tell you that my documents are on microfiche, so it's not as far back as we would think. It's not people in the 50s and 60s. It's still people who taught in the late 90s may have microfiche. And that is our proposal and the rationale for the licensure fee increases. I am happy to take any questions, Dr. Dempsey, if there are from.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I guess I just feel like as a teacher representative, I need to just say this. I understand the rationale and the business side of the increase. But obviously, there are a lot of teachers that pay for their own supplies and their own resources and their, own things in the classroom every year. And with potential little to no raise in the salary, I just wouldn't feel right if I just didn't say, I think that large of an increase, which I know it's only over, every 5 years, can be a lot to put back on teachers in addition to all of the things that they're paying for in their own classrooms and that sort of thing. And I will say I renewed this year and it was done within a week. So they are working hard in that licensure office to make sure that those things are getting done. So I understand the rationale and the budgeting and the need for it. But I just, as a teacher representative on the commission, wouldn't feel right if I didn't, put in just a little bit of kind of pushback there.
Understood.
Are there other questions or comments? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve the policy amendments to LICN 008 to be sent to the State Board of Education in August? And if anyone made a motion, you were muted. Dr. Evans, in the absence of a motion, we would not forward the amendments to the state board. Is that the result?
There has to be approval.
Right.
So Dr. Dempsey, I will make the motion with deferring to what Ms. Edwards has shared and sharing that concern as well. But I think that we've got to have the staff and the tools to do the work. And I will also just say that just a few years ago, the cost to renew your license was actually more than what it is now. And I recognize that it can be a burden, but a professional license is something that these teachers and staff own. So I hope that they can understand, while they might not be happy about it, that we have to make these tough decisions sometimes.
Thank you, Dr. Holm. Is there a second?
I'll second with the sense of what Dr. Holland said and Madison as well, that certainly we want to assist and help and provide needs for our teachers. Also, our licensure staff works hard, and if these are necessary moves for us to be successful in the future, that's the direction we have.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Aaron Fleming.
Yes.
Question for Dr. Tomlin. I think I know a lot of us struggled on this in trying to determine if we should move this on, but and I understand it's something that probably needs to be done. But has there been any work in requesting, anything in the state budget in terms of, and if you mentioned this, I missed it, but in terms of state support for the licensure department? Either with staffing or additional funding for new technology, a new licensure system, et cetera?
So to answer that question, well, let me specify changes to the licensure system could be supported through state appropriations designated for business system modernization. So this is a business of DPI, and so the initial shift from our current online licensure system to a more updated platform could be supported through state appropriations to the business system modernization, through the business system modernization fund. The maintenance of that software and all the salaries of licensure staff and all the functions of licensure are receipts supported. There is no state appropriation to support the licensure endeavor, and this is true of all North Carolina occupational licensing boards, and that's why the slide I presented on the other licensing boards across the state, they are also driven fully by receipts, and you can see the level of renewal that they require in order to maintain their support to their constituents. And the teaching profession is well below those requirements. And so we are, in effect, a North Carolina Occupational Licensing Board, and we have maintained this service to the field. And we've leveraged the volume, I think, is one of the reasons why ours is lower. But even that volume can't support the updated and the more constant need of our staff. And I think in particular, it is the customer service piece of this. When this was set up many years ago, when we launched the online licensure system, I think back in 2015 or so, it was perceived as largely self-service, that educators could do all these things by themselves, and we could maintain these low licensure fees because it was largely self-service. But my experience since being connected with licensure has been that is not the desire of the field. The desire of the field is they want someone to assist them and talk them through it. And so I think that's what those two things, the technology and our responsiveness to the demands of the field, is what's driving this requirement or this proposal.
Hey, good morning, Tom. This is Scott. I have a question.
Sure.
So do you have a sense, well, first of all, two questions and then a comment. Has the Department of Public Instruction or the State Board made a request to the legislature for any funding to support the necessary upgrades and infrastructure to help support licensure. And second, our school district reimburses teachers for the cost of the license. So do you think that's a common practice?
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't speak to that because, from our perspective, we're not seeing any of that. That's blind to us on our side. Right. All we know is the educator, and by law, the actual educator has to pay the licensure, the application fee. What's happening, but outside of the system, I do think there are some that do, but I don't know how prevalent it is. Ms. Ruiz, do you have any information on that? Do you have any knowledge of that?
I do not, actually. I have heard anecdotally that there are certain types of applications or certain systems that may do this, but it's not hard and fast data. It's more anecdotal. So I would be in the same, my comments would echo yours, Tom.
Okay.
Sure, I appreciate that. Well, I'll just say I'm not in support of the change, but essentially because it will be passing along a cost to the school system, not to the employee in our case. I'd like to see better customer service and a better timely turnaround and response from licensure, though I realize that's a catch-22. If we can increase the cost, then we can increase the staffing, we can have better customer service, but that's just not what we're seeing right now.
Sure.
Hey, Tom, this is Ann. I have a question, and you may have covered this and I may have missed it, so I apologize in advance. How much do you think this increase will generate in budget, and how many positions would that be?
So, using data from the I think we're using the 21-22 fiscal year, because at the time we did all this research, 22-23 wasn't completed yet. The revenues from the number of applications and the types of applications would yield annual revenues of about $2.7 million. And so that goes to employee salaries and the maintenance of our current system, as well as any resources. So things like office supplies for licensure staff and buying computers, all that comes out of that budget. And the margins are very thin on that budget. This proposed increase would increase that to about 3.9 million. Because as you can see, the biggest shift is in the renewal, and that is the largest single application that we have. So if we're thinking about $1.2 million annually, that would equate. It's hard to say what the technology cost would be. We know from the RFP that the maintenance on a much more advanced system would definitely break the budget. We're looking, I think we spend roughly $200,000 a year on maintenance, and that would go up to $400,000 or $500,000 a year for a current technology platform. And if that's the case, we'd be looking at probably being able to support 5 or 6 more staff in the agency.
And currently there are how many that work on this every day? I know there are different pieces, but there's how many people work on licensure now? So I'm just trying to figure out a percentage of increase.
Sure. So if we think about FTEs, Dr. Evans, could you go back to the slide the context slide that showed the FTEs? So we've got 10 FTEs that function solely as specialists. 2 FTEs are process assistants, so they're receiving the hard copies, and they're uploading them. They're digitizing them, uploading the system. They're not processing those applications. 4 FTEs are regional assistant licensure. They do processing, but we ask them to work with the districts to collect their prioritizations. And so they work exclusively with the regions in their district and collect those applications that the LEAs wish to prioritize. And they also provide training to the licensure specialists. So I would say processing time, that's equivalent to 2 FTEs. And then our 3 FTEs that are managers that function as specialists, I'd say combined across them, that's maybe 1 FTE total. And so you're looking at approximately 13 to 14 FTEs working on processing licenses.
So at least a 35 to 40% increase if that's where you put the funds, or if someone puts the funds there, not you particularly, but.
That's right. If we could, so if we say we have 15 FTEs in processing and we supported 5 more in that regard, that would be a 33% increase.
Yeah.
In staff.
I think it's helpful to
and Dr. Elliott, I'm sorry about that. We have raised this issue with the legislature in the past. I can't give you specifics on that. I would have to talk to our legislative liaison, but this is every budget cycle. This is a question that we ask. Can we get state appropriations to support the licensure so that fees do not have to increase? This has been a longstanding issue of, and other states do it this way. That's why we don't have other states around us. Their licensure fees were fairly comparable, but there are some notable exceptions, like Maryland. Every application has a $10 fee, but their licensure process is fully supported by state appropriations. And that $10 fee is just to ensure that people aren't just flooding the system with, with requests because it doesn't cost anything. They charge a nominal fee just to make sure people need what they're asking for. But there are other areas where it's not supported, and their fees are much higher than ours. So there's a lot of difference in how states address this. I could certainly connect with our liaison and see what the response has been about appropriation support for this. And I do think Dr. Holland had a question earlier that.
I did. I was just going to add, thanks, Tom. I haven't been around since DIRT. It's not good to have all this information in the back of my head, but I will say that I know that in 2015 with the online system, the intent was that it would be mostly self-service, but because of the complicated nature of licensure in many respects, staff coming into school districts, new school districts, people who don't understand, the school districts try to take some of the load off of the department, but they're just not able to in every instance. So it's necessary for school districts to also have a resource for support, and we try to encourage employees at the school district level, let us help you first, but that doesn't always work either. And I do believe historically at one point in time, there were state-funded positions in the licensure division, because when I was there way back when, I think we were about 50-50. But with budget cuts and things that have happened to the department year after year after year after year, licensure became more fully self-supported through receipts. And without substantial revenue from the state, the licensure department I would not say could continue to function. These folks are some of the hardest working people probably, and put up with a lot more than the average person would. So it's hard to say, yes, let's increase this cost and put the burden on the individual financially. districts who are able to support their teachers is very fortunate. And a great recruitment and retention tool. I hate it, but I feel like it's necessary.
And Dr. Tomlin, this is Van, just to make sure I'm clear on an earlier point, the positions are totally receipt supported.
That is correct. And the budget also supports some other positions that are not directly related to the processing of licenses. So there's a paralegal in the legal office who works exclusively on revocations. That's supported by that position is supported by licensure as well. And some data, IT, there's an IT function that's supported by licensure. And then there's a data analytics position that's partially supported by licensure. So it's not 100% going to the processing. There's a lot of support around licensure that requires some of that receipts to support as well.
And based on the current motion before the commission and past activity, if hypothetically the proposed amendment would pass, which would increase the fees, and then after this, we were able to convince the General Assembly that they should fund, at least in a supplemental way, these partial funding through appropriation for this, PEPSC could consider a decrease in the fees in the future given any subsequent action around funding.
Yes, so the authority that resides with the state board is not just to increase those fees, it's to set them either higher or lower. That's right. Correct.
Correct, yeah. Any other questions or comments?
This is Connie.
Yes.
I'm a little on the fence with this because I just feel like educators feel like they're not getting any additional funding. They're pulling so much money out of their pocket already to support. However, I do see the need from talking to individuals to have that one-on-one conversation. You can put everything you want on the internet or on some type of technology for them to view, but sometimes the questions they need answered are specific to them and their needs at that particular time. So I'm kind of torn with this, to be honest with you. I just see that we're constantly adding more and more to educators without a budget being passed. They're not receiving increases. And then on the flip side of that, a lot of educators feel that DPI is receiving increases. But I do see the need for this. So I just don't know how to vote. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. I just feel a little concerned about adding more to educators because they're already taking so much out of their pockets to support their classrooms. But however, I do see that many people would love to have that additional person that they could speak to because their concerns are specific to them and it may not be on some website that they can find to answer. So I just don't know how to respond other than that. So those are just my comments.
Connie, I do some of the same thoughts. I do wonder, this is Ann, I wondered if we need the information about what could be done and should this be different than other license given the teacher shortage, given all the things teachers are dealing with that maybe other professions aren't dealing with in their licensure. I know historically this is the way North Carolina has done licensure and fees, and fees make budgets that make staff, et cetera, for all these different areas. But I do wonder if it's time to ask if this is different, because we are seeing it. A lot of us are seeing it as different.
And this is Craig, and Connie, I also echo a lot of your sentiments of feeling a little bit torn here. And, given my own experience working with license, I will say I'll give the licensure office a lot of credit, because in my experiences throughout the years, I've had a very high response rate. And that's even talking to some teachers who have had some unique circumstances. So I know that that's, not the case across the board just due to the volume, but my own personal experience has been very positive with responsiveness from licensure. I also am very much on the fence on this, and a lot of it has to do with just simply the timing of this right now and in the culture and climate that our teachers are facing in North Carolina. And so I'm very much hesitant to support this.
I want to add again, is Connie, I'm not taking away from anything that licensure is doing, because I think they're overworked. I think it's a lot. I think that in hindsight, we're all overworked. Educators across North Carolina are feeling that. I think it's not just one group of people. I think it's all educators. So I know that licensure does a lot. Once again, I'm just kind of on the fence here.
Dr. Dempsey, if I may, can we call for the vote and then see where we are after the vote?
Well, we can certainly do that with the clear knowledge that we are where we are after the vote. I mean, once that vote is taken, that would be the vote. Just to state the obvious.
Well, that would be Dr. Dempsey is there, and Fleming, I call for question.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. The motion is before the commission to approve the policy amendments to license LICN 008. It has been moved and seconded and discussed. And Dr. Evans, I'll try this as a voice vote, but then we may have to go to a roll call vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
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 Dr. Evans?
Dr. Blanton?
Nay.
Dr. Bullock?
Nay.
Dr. Dempsey, Chair Dempsey?
Nay.
Vice Chair Fleming?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Nay.
Let's go. Dr. Elliott?
No.
Dr. Penfield?
Nay.
Dr. Holland?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dr. Holland?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Weddington?
Nay.
Dr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Nay.
Did I miss anyone?
Yes, Connie.
I'm sorry, Dr. Locklear. I have
Nay.
to mark you here. No. Did I miss anyone else? We have 9 no's and 3 yeses.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. The motion fails. I'm going to ask, I don't know if we can do this in real time in the meeting, but Dr. Evans, can we communicate with the attorneys who support PEPSC in terms of a process to bring this back before PEPSC at a future date? I know this specific motion has failed, but there is a complex context behind this motion, and because we have this tension between the burden of the cost being on the educators and the burden of the work being on the staff. And I think there is a tension we can resolve eventually. But can we check and see what the procedure is for bringing the motion back at a future meeting? Oh, I see Ms. Schaefer's on the call.
Yes, I'm on the call.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, we will work with Dr. Tomlin on a process. We'll have to look at the statute and review what the process would be, but we will do that.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you, Dr. Tomlin, and thank you to everybody on the commission for the intentionality and the focus of that discussion. Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. Now, Dr. Andrew Seiberg will provide an update on the EPP accountability rules. Dr. Seiberg.
Thank you. Good morning, members. This is just a quick one. We're still in the process of preparing data to respond to Dr. Penfield's request last month of how setting different cut levels for triggering sanctions impact the numbers of programs across the field. And with the addition of Patrick Doherty to our team, we're leveraging his additional expertise to QC the accountability data set, which we're in the process of doing right now, and get that done. Once we have that done, we're going to run some analyses to address Dr. Penfield's request. And we anticipate these analyses to be brought to this commission in the August meeting. And that's the update.
Any questions from commissioners? Next, I would like to discuss the PEPSC officer designated as secretary in terms of the duties of that role and the identification of a secretary. PEPSC does have a secretary by statute, and that position, while we have had turnover in other positions, there has not been turnover, but there has also not been any discussion of any change in that role brought before the commission. Dr. Ann Bullock currently serves in that role. She was elected as secretary at the creation of PEPSC and continues to serve in that role. One of the elements of this discussion, as I've talked through it with DPI staff and Dr. Bullock, is making sure we have clarification on what it is the secretary is expected to do, which would include, for example, calling the roll for the meetings, calling the roll for any voice votes that may occur in PEPSC deliberations, confirming members who make a motion and who second the motion as part of the record of the meeting, and Dr. Evans would keep that record. Dr. Bullock has informed me that she is willing to stay on as secretary with these responsibilities. Prior to confirming that, if that were to happen, I did want to open up to the commission the opportunity for anyone who may be willing to serve in that role, which would of course lead to an election of a secretary. Is there anyone who has interest in serving as the secretary other than Dr. Bullock? Hearing none. And Dr. Bullock, assuming that at this moment you are still willing to serve as secretary, I would like, without objection, to continue with Dr. Bullock in that position, and then that position would be part of the ongoing process of governance of the commission as we discussed at a previous PEPSC meeting. Dr. Bullock, you're still willing to serve?
I am willing to serve and happy to take on real responsibilities as secretary.
And we're happy to remind you of them. So thank you.
I look forward to it, Megan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Any other questions or comments on that item? If there are no other items for discussion, thank you, commission members, advisors, and staff for your preparation for the discussions. I remind commission members that our next monthly meeting will be held virtually on Thursday, August the 10th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. I'd also like to remind you that starting in September, the time for the monthly PEPSC meetings will change to 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. to accommodate a broader constituency that may want to listen in on the meetings. We have now completed our meeting, and unless there is additional business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, Connie.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Aaron Fleming.
Thanks, sir. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.